welcome everyone to the After School Special. My name is Allison, and today we have Michelle Cable joining us. Michelle is the founder of Panache Booking and Management, home to artists like Segall, Mac Demarco, and King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard. So thank you so much for joining us. We are very excited to have you. So why don't you start by telling us about how Panache started as a zine while you were a teenager and how it has developed into the agency and management company it is today.
Yeah, so I'm Michelle, and I run two companies called Panache, Panache Booking and Panache Management. And I started working in music when I was really young, like at the age of 15. I was just pretty much bored in the small town of Eureka, California I grew up in. And I started a zine out of boredom. And I started interviewing a bunch of bands for that zine. And because in the town I grew up in, there wasn't really much going on, and I would go to a few concerts, but I didn't really have a lot of stimulus from other people. And so getting to interview music that I liked and meet musicians that lived in other cities outside of the small town I was in kind of, created a whole other world that opened up, me to a lot of information. And so when I was probably like 16, I think in 98, I started releasing the magazine, and that led to me doing shows. And so I started hosting concerts, and that led to me promoting shows where I grew up, and I did that for 5 years. And so as a teenager I was going to a lot of bars and hosting bands at my house. I have a lot of funny stories of bands staying with me when I was just in high school, and and I got really, really into it, and kind of that became like my passion. And so I interviewed bands, put them out in the zine, and the zine started as just 400 copies, photocopied, where I would be in a local diner drinking coffee and hand collating all the copies and then releasing it for free. Nice. And then eventually over the next few years it moved, probably over like the span of 4 or 5 years, it moved to being full color, and 40,000 copies I think is what I distributed, which is pretty crazy.
Pretty good,
yeah, and it was always free. And and so I became a promoter, and just kind of like everything in my life is kind of like one thing kind of led to another. And it was a very organic way for me to move from making a zine and interviewing bands, because I love to write, and I just kind of took that tool and used it, in music. And then eventually that led to promoting shows, and that led to me having this really cool network of bands across the country that I knew, and they helped distribute the magazine. And then that network of people eventually led to me starting a booking agency when I was about 22.
That's really cool. And so how has your experience been only having worked for yourself through your entire career and never having worked for anyone else?
I mean, I did intern for someone for 3 hours, I think, and then they fired me it was another booking agency, and they fired me from the internship because they thought I was too eager and that I wanted a job, which wasn't true at all. Or that's what I was told. And so since then that was like my only foray in another person's company. But I feel really lucky, because honestly one of my biggest fears for a long time was having to work for someone else, and getting to be my own boss has been, a really rewarding experience. And I've been able to really pick and choose who we hire, the bands we work with, kind of what I will put up with, day in and day out. Because with our roster, we're such a small company, we, have these really intimate relationships with our artists that feel very much like family. And so if you're dealing day to day with people that, you don't respect as human beings, it's not a very positive experience. So like being my own boss and running 2 different companies has allowed me to really curate our roster, which is nice and very rewarding as well. So I couldn't imagine it any other way.
That's really great. And I've listened to other interviews you've done, and it's definitely clear, it comes across that you're a huge music fan, so maybe I just answered that question anyways, but what has inspired you the most, like career-wise or personally?
I would say that, personally, I've been inspired by the ability to be able to help all the artists I work with find sustainability and, comfort in this career in the music industry. I've watched most of the musicians I've worked with for probably 6 to 8 years, especially on the management side, and it's been really amazing to watch them be able to buy houses and to find some sort of stability and like reassurance that they'll be okay as musicians in this industry, which can also be very like fragile, and it comes in waves of success. And so a lot of the artists I work with have been able to stay true to their ethos, stay independent, like kind of stick to their guns about the things that are really important to them and not quote unquote sell out, and still be able to maintain, I feel like a career that does have a lot of sustainability and life force, and makes them feel good about what they're doing day in and day out. And that's been really true to how I do my work and how I work within my own company, and and finding like-minded artists that I can really help them fulfill their goals, and also like be happy while they're doing it, and find this level of like their own like solid foundation has been really rewarding, because most of the people I've worked with for a really long time, and they've become family, and and that's just really meaningful to know that I'm kind of helping them live the life that they want to live. And I can't imagine it any other way. And so whenever I see that, and I know that like in watching people I know like be able to tour, but also be able to choose if they want to stay at home and produce and do other things, and not have to be on the road all the time, and just find comfort in like various aspects of the music industry, and knowing that I have a hand in that is very motivating.
Nice, I love that answer. And one of the things that stuck out at me about Panache, and I'm sure a lot of people who come across your company, is that it is like female run. I'm pretty sure all the everyone in it is a woman, right? So why don't you talk a bit about that, and then more generally kind of being a woman in the industry and your experience?
So it's not intentional that we kind of are all women at Panache. It's just kind of ended up that way over the years. So, I own the company, and, the booking agency actually right now is only one other female agent, this woman Meredith, who lives in New Orleans. And then my longtime management assistant is also, a woman who lives in Michigan. And then the office assistant in LA is another woman named Haley. And so kind of the main like foundation of Panache is all women. And then we've had, various interns come in and out of the office that, are male or female, or, non-binary. But like we, have just really been able to, I feel like with all the women I work with, provide a really comfortable place where they can excel and and feel like they're heard. And it's been nice as a woman to also kind of feel like I'm not being held back in any way by that. It's definitely a fight, but I feel like all the artists that I work with know that I can do just as good of a job for them as a man in my position can. And I think it's really important for female run companies to exist, and to, and to prove that point, and also not be competitive with other women, which I think is very common in the music industry, especially because there's not that many higher up positions that exist in the industry. And then I feel like there needs to be more companies owned by women, and and more companies advocating to hire women in positions of power. And so anything I can do, with my two companies, which are small and boutique, but anything I can do to help make that, more possible, or set a good example, I definitely want to encourage.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And like you said, it's nice to support women in the industry instead of a feeling of competitiveness.
It's really, really important. And unfortunately, I feel like in the, because I work in the booking industry and the management world, I feel like in the booking industry, maybe up until recently, it has been really, really competitive. But my experience in the management world is that people are a lot more supportive and willing to share resources. But hopefully that will all start to shift more so as well.
Definitely. And you're also a mother in the industry, so why don't you speak a bit on that?
Yeah, I became a mom to a beautiful little boy named Lawrence
That's so nice.
about a year ago. And, and that's opened up this whole world to me as well. I've become friends with so many other mothers in the music industry and other, just in the workforce. And I feel like once someone finds out you're about to become a mom or you're a mom, there's like this kind of, interconnection that just starts. I had so many women that I only met once or didn't even meet that gave me advice, or they were offering to be there for me. And if I had any questions, they gave me advice on how to travel, with the baby, or if I was away from the baby and was still, like pumping and everything. And, and like so many stories were shared with me that were very well received on my end. And it's, and it's been really amazing to have that support. But then, then again, too, like, by being my own boss, like I didn't have maternity leave because, I'm my own boss. And so I really had to kind of come up with a system of how it would work after I had my son to, to stay on top of things and not lose any of my clients or not appear weak in the industry as a new mom. And, and it's frustrating that I even had to think about those things. But to be honest, like having, like a couple of the women on my team that stuck with me through it were really, really helpful in making that successful. And then once again, just being able to work with artists that were supportive of me taking this next move and expanding my world into being a mom, which is something I've always wanted to do, and having them be really supportive and patient of that, makes a big difference. And so I'm very, very aware of the situation that I've been able to create for myself in this industry, and to be surrounded by really supporting and loving artists, and that understand all of that balance is really helpful and key. And and as my journey into motherhood only progresses as my kid gets older, it's especially now with the situation of being at home and not having any childcare. I'm very lucky to have a supportive partner too who can work from home as well and be there for me. So we it's a juggling act, but I feel like in the music industry, through everything I did from being very young, teaching myself and having sleepless nights learning how to do things on my own, and just kind of taking on way too many roles. In the beginning I learned how to multitask, and I think that's really helped with balancing out my time, and but of course when you become a parent, one of the biggest priorities is suddenly this child, and that's been a whole new experience for me. And so it's been really cool that everyone I work with is supportive and interested in hearing stories about him, which is fun too. Our baby's first concert, I think, was Mac Demarco at.
That's so funny.
I want to say it was at the Greek, and then it was at the Greek. But then his first festival was Bikini Kill at Riot Fest.
Oh my goodness, that's so funny. And one thing I want to talk about as well, your artists have very close relationships with their fans. How do you think that played into their success, or was that intentional? Like, I think about Mac putting his address at the end of one of his songs and inviting people over for tea. So, talk a bit about that.
I think maybe he probably won't ever do that again, but well, it's interesting because I had a friend of mine recently point out that a lot of the artists I work with do have this really engaging relationship with their audience members and fans. And because we were talking about Mac, and then also another band I work with, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard from Australia. It's kind of the same thing, this really like fanatical audience who really want to know the individual artist and who they are, but also when they're allowed inside that world, and I feel like Mac, especially in the early days, like he hung out with people, after the show, before the show, and he was really kind of like this tangible, artist to these kids, and kind of just like, like a friend to them. And, and he, by putting his address at the end of the record, and actually entertaining hundreds and hundreds of kids, that came by for coffee at any given hour. His cell phone number was out there, and he'd so many times I'd be surprised that he would be having these like full on text conversations or phone conversations with various fans. But, Mac was very generous and, and is still very generous, but was very generous with his whole, world in the beginning. And I really think that lent to his success. I really think that, besides being a really talented artist and, captivating performer, that personal relationship that he allowed his fans to have with him, went so far. And I can only imagine, like, as a kid, when some of his fans are, pretty young, not all of them, but a lot of them, if I'd been able to have those, even if it was just one interaction, some of these fans have had multiple interactions with him, like how I'd be a fan for life of that artist. And growing up where I grew up in Eureka, that was not that many bands toured through there of any larger level. I booked a lot of smaller punk bands through, and so it would have been really hard for me to even have that experience. I used to just go to San Francisco to see bands, and that was not very often that I could get away and do that. But I just think it really, something really connects with the artist and the musician and the fan when that happens. And I just feel like, you're gonna have a supportive, fan in your life forever. And it's cool to see him impact his fans in that way and have it really go so far, because we still get, countless emails from parents or kids asking him to, propose or to their fiance or soon to be fiance, or ask someone out to a prom date, and, or wish someone happy birthday. And, he used to really engage in that, less so, now I think Mac's taken a little more time for himself, which is well deserved. But even my relationship with, I try to respond, and I've said this in other interviews, where I do try to respond to every email that comes into my inbox, and make sure that the person who's writing knows that they're, they've gotten through and that they're being heard, and to, at least, try to help them or acknowledge that they, reached us, which I think is really important. But with Gizzard, it's the same way too. And I think they're another band that I work with very closely that has a lot of success based on, them as artists, but also their fan engagement and interactions. And they're always trying to like get creative of how they can continue to grow that as well. And same thing with Mac. That's why we started his fan club, several years ago, is because we really wanted to have something for like this group of fans and create this kind of like community that we could engage with. And that's been really fun as well to be a part of.
That's really nice, and it makes it so special for the fans too. And before, you had mentioned that your artists take more of a DIY approach to things. Do you think that's one of the ways they do that?
Yeah, I mean, with the fan, like the fan and engagement, or
yeah, or just in general.
Yeah, I think like someone like an artist, like, a lot of the artists I work with didn't tour in a bus, for years, even if it made more sense, or you would think that they would. And a lot of the reason behind that for someone like Mac was he wanted to be able to hang out with people after a show. And when we did the fan club in the beginning, we did so many meet and greets where Mac would sit in between like sound check. So we would like sound check and then sit in between sound check and the concert and just sign autographs and take selfies and do these, one-on-one experiences with these kids. And I think, the fact that we have this sort of like, rolling with the punches, we're a very organized machine, but at the same time, like there's a level of, Mac wanting to keep it minimal or simpler, and in the beginning especially, and that kind of allowed him to have the fans to have this access to him. And and same thing with Gizzard and Ty Segall in his early days. And I think also when like the team of people that work with a lot of the bands I book and manage are pretty small teams, and so there's a lot of room for discussion of how you want to do things, and everyone's very hands-on. And I think that allows you to have the interaction you want to have with fans, or the interaction you want to have with anyone involved in, especially when you're on the road, as opposed to if you're part of this kind of like bigger machine. Sometimes you just kind of have to fit yourselves into this system. And but with with a lot of the artists I work with, everyone who's part of the team are very, very involved in all aspects of it, which I think, allows for a really cohesive, working group of, members of the touring party, or of when an album comes out. So everyone's in constant communication, and I just feel like it helps things roll out more smoothly, as opposed to if, someone kind of isn't as aware of what's going on, with the bigger picture stuff. But, I think I always try to find really passionate members to be part of the touring team or the album campaign team. So people that kind of understand how hard the artist is working, and wanting to kind of, jump in and do, go the extra mile to make it all work. And I definitely think with a lot of the bands I work with, I would have to say, and not just myself or the people that work for Panache, but everyone does a lot of extra work to, to just help out. And also because they understand why that works better, and they also enjoy doing it, I think, too, because they're treated well by the artists they work with, I think, as well. So, and that's, and then there's also the whole element of, like working and being my own boss and running the two companies I run is kind of like all I know, but I've also kind of had glimpses on the other side of things. And I definitely feel like the way that our team does it, and our very like involved, hands-on, like, approach, has been really helpful in getting artists to be like, have like successful careers, and, and also have, when they tour, like be safe. And, I feel like that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. And then speaking more on your artist development and the growth in their careers, how do you approach international development for your artists?
So when I was doing booking only, I was mostly focusing on probably, North America, so Canada, US, Mexico, and maybe occasionally would be involved in something in Japan or South America. But now with the management, I'm involved globally with the artists I manage. And I think a little bit of that started with Ty working on some of his international tours. And then with Mac, I kind of started bringing him to South America, all over Asia, and, overseeing his European bookings with his European agent. And then, through a lot of the work that I did in the management world, I now have started booking Bikini Kill worldwide as well, which has been really fun to be a part of. And so, like globally, I'm very involved in what, the artists I manage do, but then also with some of the artists I book, I help them out as well, because I have these connections and relationships with people across the world. And I used to travel a lot too. So I used to kind of go from panel to panel, and as a delegate, and talk. I think one year I was in like Australia, New Zealand, China, and Iceland, all in like a month time. And and that was really rewarding, and and it was really great because I connected a lot of the dots in my world and met a lot of people that I still have relationships with now. But that was a crazy time when I did all of that. But for a long time, I would still continue to go on panels and meet various people, and I think expand Panache's reach. And we work with a lot of international bands, and so, and we help get them visas to come to the US. But also, because of my relationship with artists I work with, when I end up working with an international band, a lot of times I end up visiting where they're from a lot. Or I used to. I think having a kid, I'm definitely a lot more home based now in Los Angeles, and then also with not really traveling right now too. Things have shifted, but in the early days, and up until pretty recently, if I worked with an artist from Australia, I probably visited Australia like 7 or 8 times, and same things when I worked with an artist from Israel, or when I worked with an artist from Brazil, and and I got close to them. It was really important for me to, same thing when I worked with a lot of bands from Japan, and so I went to Japan a lot during that time to kind of see what their world was like and understand it, and you just get close to people, and you figure out ways that you can collaborate internationally. But so that's kind of how I feel like Panache has globally, been expanding.
That's really interesting. And then going on to, I guess, a more broad topic, but what do you think, if any, what do you think the biggest gap in the business is right now?
I feel like one of the biggest gaps is kind of like what we were talking about earlier, is that there's not a lot of, female owned companies in the music industry, or women in, higher positions of power. And then also, I feel like, we're learning with all the protests and Black Lives Matter movement right now going on too, that there's not a lot of people of color represented in those higher up positions. And I feel like even though the music industry, um, you know, a lot of where all the music we listen to comes from is from people of color. And so I think that's a huge gap. And as a woman, I feel like that gap of not enough female owned companies has been pretty, it's been pretty clear to me as I navigate through what I do. And, most of the times when I'm having a meeting with, the owner or the manager, or just like the CEOs of a company, generally a lot of the times they are male, or when I used to travel around on panels, a lot of times I was one of only two women on a panel of eight people, or sometimes the only female on a panel. And I would have a lot of different women come up to me after the panel and ask me, like, well, what's it like being a woman in the industry, or what's it like owning your company? And they just kind of were coming to me for resources. And I was visiting from another country too, going to like Australia or going somewhere else. And I feel like there must not be enough examples for them to kind of, seek knowledge from. And I think it's changing. I mean, hopefully all of this is changing, but I definitely think in the music industry that gap, it's the inequality and is still very rampant, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then another topic so we asked the same question to our speaker last week, and he was talking a lot about mental health in the business. And I know you've talked about that in past interviews too. So how are ways you stay balanced, or how are ways you protect the mental health of your artists and your own mental health?
Yeah, it's very important. I would say for me, like, I feel like now my whole world is so different being a mom, where, like, when you're taking care of a child that relies on you, like, for everything, like his whole existence has become my, like, life force, like it's like my, main goal. And so I would say my balance is probably a little imbalanced, right now when it comes to like sleep and everything. But I've always been a really big proponent of exercising, every day. And I feel like that has always been really good for like a mental release and endorphins, and just, feeling like I'm doing one thing to take care of myself every day. And since this like pandemic started, actually, my boyfriend and I have kind of figured out a schedule where, we can figure out our work and also taking care of our son. And one thing I've been able to do for the last 3 months, I think I'm on my 100th ride soon, is, ride a bike and every day, and get exercise that way, since I can't really go outside and run too easily,
Right.
And so that's been really helpful. And then before all of this shelter in place stuff was going on, it was a big deal when, after I had a baby, I was starting to go to Pilates. And just for me, getting to exercise and getting to have that in my day every day can kind of, no matter what else happens in the day, can kind of give me, balance or center me. I definitely am a huge believer in, meditation and, breathing methods. I feel like with a baby, it's harder to find that time to do that, unfortunately, because sometimes even when I'm on the bike, our little kid will be like banging on the on the door, waiting for me to get off of it, and or like he'll start dancing to what I'm listening to. And but I think self-care is really, really important. And I think for me, I've made choices over the years of not working with people that were abusive or their team members were abusive. It was really important with me for my mental health to kind of, regardless of the financial, impact of that, to work with people that, like were respectful and treated me, like a human being. Because a lot of times in the music industry, you'll meet people that aren't respectful and they scream and they're abusive, and that's no way to live. Like, and I only want to do this, if it continues to be enjoyable, and I know I'm doing like, positive work with the artists I work with and representing good people, and that extends to the people that they employ too, and that's more with artists that I booked, and I had to work with their managers, and so over the years to kind of ensure my mental health, I definitely have had like cleansing periods where I think one New Year's I called it quitting the BS of just like going through all the people that were just, very negative influences in my life, and cleaning up the roster I worked with, and not letting that affect me, and not working with those people because it's not worth it. And and then that goes to, for the artists I work with, I definitely think, that's a big message I've tried to send them to, is that, like when you, as a manager with artists, is like you get to choose the people that represent you, and it's really important that you like the people that represent you, because they are representing you out there in the world. And and so I think it's really important to like and respect. You don't have to be best friends with your attorney or your accountant, but I think it's really important to like the people you're hiring, and know that you have choices if you don't as well. And then I think the big thing with mental health as artists is balance and not feeling pressure. And a lot of times artists can feel pressure from, the manager, the label, the agent, everyone around them, to continually be active and, make money or create so that there is income. And I think that is definitely not a healthy environment. And so I've always tried to make sure that the artists I work with know that it's totally okay to say no. And it's totally okay to, not do things that don't stick to your ideology or your ethos. And a lot of the artists I work with are pretty known for saying no to a lot of things, and I fully support that. I don't ever want my goals to be motivated by money, and or like something that would be detrimental to the artist but might be good for me is not healthy and not going to be good in the long run. And and when it comes to touring, I think it's really important for artists to know their limits and to not tour generally over 3 weeks. I think is tough, not to have really long drive days. Because I've seen artists, especially younger artists, and I made this mistake when I was really, starting out doing stuff, where I would kind of, it wouldn't be my idea, but maybe an artist suggested going on an 8-week tour or a 10-week tour. And that's like the worst idea, with no breaks. I'm talking about like a 10-week tour with no breaks, or maybe like a few days in between. Right. That's not, like I feel like for the band morale and the sustainability of the band and mental health, it isn't ideal. And I think most artists I work with, over the years, we've kind of realized, like 2.5, 3 weeks is generally like the longest length of tour, and then having at least a few weeks in between, which can be really tough sometimes to pull off when you have this really active campaign. But it's really important and better for the the overall morale of everyone, and like sustainability of, if someone gets really burnt out, they're probably not going to want to get in, a van or a bus and do it again. They're gonna want to like do the opposite of that. And so finding, making sure that the artists I work with, like are balanced, and I always encourage everyone I work with to, try to find other sources of balance when it comes to their life. And and hopefully, like, as I've worked with a lot of musicians from kind of like early 20s into their 30s, and it's been cool watching people evolve and kind of figure out like what gives them peace, and finding peace in their like careers and in who they are and this industry, which I think it's a really fine balance, I think from being a mom, I definitely have learned. I met a lot of women that kind of have told me they've made choices over the years of how they wanted to approach their careers. And sometimes I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that, and this goes with mental health, is that like, being bigger isn't always better. Like having a company that has 30 employees or 50 employees and multiple offices doesn't actually mean like you're more successful. And I think that was something in the early days of me starting out, especially with a booking agency. I really, thought that that was like where you needed to be headed. But now I'm very understanding of, that isn't necessarily a success. And I feel like, Panache has been able to, create our own brand and a home to a really diverse group of artists who have success, and and we have success as a company because of their success and their art, and creating this balance where they feel good about who they're working with, and that we're here for them, and 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 I'm really happy with that balance. And but I think that's personal to like me and how I want to run my company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I love that. It's nice that like that's such a big value for you and that you really prioritize mental health for your artists. I think that's really good or important. And then I know that yourself and through Panache, you do a lot of philanthropic work. Like right before we started this interview, you sent me a link to Panache shirts where 100% of the proceeds go towards Black Lives Matter and supporting Black women and Black trans lives. So, can you speak more about that and the work that you do?
So one of the ways that I've been able, and this is all about balance again, I think one of the ways that I've been able to find balance in what I do, especially as what I do becomes more successful, is trying to use my resources and my connections and do greater good with that. And I feel like probably the biggest way I've been able to do that over the years, and one of the things I'm the most proud of, one of the things I'm most proud of is my work with Planned Parenthood. And it started when I was in New York with my friend Jonathan Tobin, who's a really talented DJ, who we collaborated, and we've probably been doing it for like 7 or 8 years now. But every Valentine's Day, we'll host a benefit concert for Planned Parenthood. And we started doing it in New York, and then when I left New York, I started doing it in LA. And now that I'm in LA, we've been doing it in New York, LA, Miami, Chicago, San Francisco. We did one in Michigan once, and I feel like I'm missing a city, but we will host this Valentine's Day concert on Valentine's Day, and have this kind of like review of sorts where artists play some of their favorite love songs, and in LA we'll do a big raffle. And it's fun. Like, sometimes we'll have up to 20 artists performing, and all the proceeds go to the local Planned Parenthood. And that's been really amazing and inspiring. And I think I really realized that we were making a difference when one of the events in New York, the woman who runs the Planned Parenthood in New York, or one of the representatives, told us that the amount of money we raised funded healthcare for free in all 5 boroughs of New York for a whole day for anyone who came in, which was,
Oh my goodness.
I feel like, much more tangible for me to understand. And since then, we've been able to raise, much more than that by doing it in 5 different cities. I think in LA this year in February, and that was the last concert I've gone to, was the Planned Parenthood benefit that we organized. I think this year we raised over $21,000 in the LA one alone, and combined with the 5 across the country, I think it was like $48,000 or $50,000. I'd have to.
That's so incredible.
Yeah, but I love doing that, and it's definitely, the benefits are kind of the organization that goes into it, and especially with doing the raffle where we get like 100 donations from local businesses in LA, and I kind of like MC and host the thing and host the raffle from stage. It's definitely it's definitely the most exhausting and involved event that I'm part of, a project I'm part of, and but it's also one of the most rewarding because of the positive help, and and I think it's motivated a lot of people to to try to help Planned Parenthood. And so we just announced that, and I think this interview is coming out when the T-shirts will still be available, but we have, like, Panache as a company hasn't we don't really have a lot of merch, and we haven't done a T-shirt in over like a decade or something, and so we just announced that we are collaborating with our friends who run a merch company, and I'm releasing a Panache design, but the all 100% of the profits are going to 3 different Black Lives Matter charities, and those are really important to me from the research that I've done. And I feel like as a company, we are trying to do as much as we can, to make a difference in the world. And it's stuff that I'm like, I think during the pandemic, there's a couple of new ideas that we'll be announcing soon of other like philanthropic stuff we'll be doing, to help out and get creative. And that hopefully will continue to grow. And it's been a nice way for me to spend my time. But we're going to be announcing some other stuff soon, like some other fun adventures and expansions, and that will vary into that world.
If you weren't doing what you were doing now, what do you think you would be doing?
I think in the last couple of years, I realized if I wasn't working in the music industry, I probably would be trying to do more philanthropic work, and maybe work with an organization like Planned Parenthood, and try to do, more positive work and help other people, if I wasn't working in the industry. But it's been nice to be able to kind of do both and like entwine, the two. And then, and then of course I think becoming a mom now too, it's that's like become a huge enjoyment in my life, and definitely like, one of the things I enjoy most about my days is being a mom. And so I'm lucky that I can kind of do all of that. And then I feel like if you asked me that question like 10 years ago, I loved to bake, and I always thought I'd be baking instead of, I always used to say I'd be baking instead of booking, because I do love to bake. But now I think, and I feel like hopefully I'll find ways of getting to do this more, but yeah, getting to work more with nonprofits and different causes, and activism is really important, and and I'm learning every day about how to do that better.
That's really nice. And then when was the last time or thing you were reminded of why you do this?
So it used to be like when I would do South by Southwest, we would get 15 or 20 of our artists together, and it would suddenly like kind of all click. Because I actually used to have fun at South by Southwest, where it'd be like, oh, this is why I'm doing this, because it's like this community and all these people are together, and that was, it was like, everything made sense of, like I've brought all these people together, and it just felt very like family. And I think now, especially, and to talk about the charity stuff again, probably like when we do the benefit stuff, it's been very fun, and like moving to kind of work with, because a lot of the artists I work with the benefit stuff for Planned Parenthood aren't just artists I represent. And so I'll reach out to other artists or manager friends of mine who work other artists, and we are able to kind of get their bands involved too. And so it's been really cool to see people get really creative and inspired by doing that sort of work and helping out with that. And I feel like that's probably the last thing that reminds me of why I do what I do, and why it's great to have these, resources, and also work with people that want to help, and I think just based on I think that was the last time I was really out, in a crowd of people too and stuff. Yeah. It's like, like that, not to go back to that, but that was very, very powerful.
Nice. And then this is actually the last question I have for you. What is the one thing that you don't know that you think you need to know?
The one thing I don't know that I think I need to know is when people will publicly be able to hang out again in a social setting.
Fair enough.
No, that's just, I thought that question was funny, because I feel like if I knew that, I would definitely have an advantage on kind of how to direct the rest of, the way my year and next year goes into, especially in the booking world and whatnot. But we're all guessing what's gonna happen.
That's funny.
And stuff, but just rolling with the punches with that.
Yeah, I guess that's especially hard on the booking side, not knowing when concerts can come back.
With the booking stuff, we were the most, we were the first impacted, I think, probably by having to close, and then the last, probably live concerts will probably be one of the last things to reopen their doors as well. So it's a weird time to be in the music industry. I always thought with the booking stuff, I chose a really kind of like reliable aspect of the music industry to get involved, because everyone always loves going to concerts, and I feel like people are always going to want that aspect of a band. And it's relatively you can kind of work from wherever, with your laptop and just your phone and stuff. But now when you think about people not being able to gather in large spaces, and that's kind of what a booking agent does, we book gatherings in small and large spaces, it it changes the whole world of things. And I'm definitely one of the agents that have spent I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is happening and move tours to now 3 times, and that's been really crazy to think about doing again and again. So I think I'm just trying to take more of a kind of like a peaceful approach to it, and just not worry about it too much at this point, and just and I think there's hopefully a lot of silver lining with everything that's going on of positive change happening. I feel like one thing that's been discussed a lot in my household and with other friends is just that because of the pandemic, this is allowing people to actually pay attention to what's going on in the world, and why there's such great numbers of people protesting, and people are actually really noticing that things do need to change. And and so someone was calling it the great pause to me the other day, like in the music industry. And I think a lot of people are using this time to kind of do a lot of inner reflection and get projects that they've always wanted to done, or find that vacation time that they never had, or do a lot of like social justice work. And and I think all those are really positive things. And one thing that's come about from this too that I think is really cool that I meant to mention in the interview as well is that I've become a member, and I'm a founding member of this organization called NIDO, and I'll send you a link, but it stands for the National Independent Talent Organization. And pretty much in the wake of the pandemic, a group of independent booking agents have joined forces now with managers and independent artists and crew members to kind of create a stronger voice for the independent music community, to be heard during this, since a lot of people might not survive this, as businesses afterwards. And so it's been cool to be a part of this organization that are trying to rally everyone together to, hopefully get support, from government extended, but also just to kind of unify, which I think doesn't happen in the US a lot with organizations like the ones I'm part of, where people don't kind of create these collectives where they're supportive of each other rather than being, competitive and stuff. And so that's been cool that's come up from this as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm interested to look more into that.
Yeah, I'll send you a link, but I feel like hopefully more and more people will just be supportive of each other, and, more unified, and, and take better care of each other from this. And
yeah, definitely. For sure.
Yeah.
Well, that brings me to the end of my questions. So thank you so much again for your time and for jumping on with us. I really enjoyed speaking with you. And thanks so much to everyone who watched. Our next episode will be up 2 weeks from now, so keep an eye out. Thanks.